I've always been a very what if person, trying to understand the world. I very much felt very confused by everything around me. And I didn't know why. I felt like an alien dropped off in this world without a script. And I could see other people, communicating and being able to interact and have no troubles at all. And things like that, like starting conversations or what to say to people, were really confusing.
All right, welcome everyone to another beautiful episode of the One Moment Podcast. I am your boy and your co-host Kevo, Ko, K-Dog, whatever you want to call me. Doesn't matter. People call me all sorts of things. Been called probably some of the worst names you can probably think of years ago. I think some of those names have retired by now. Now, with that being said, listen, everybody knows what we do here on the show. Before we get into talking with this amazing, beautiful, distinguished young lady, let me just throw the disclaimer out there. We talk a lot about mental health, substance use, suicide prevention, things like that, minority issues, things like that. A lot of things that we talk about is educational information only and shall not be used for professional practices or anything of that sort. Everything we do is informational and educational. If you are triggered at all during any of today's episode, please utilize your resources. If you stay in the Western Hemisphere, we have 988 and 911, both of those hotlines or phone numbers. You also have local emergency departments and local crisis centers. Now, during the conversation, we do try to identify other resources. So our distinguished guest, who lives in a different country, might have some resources that she will share along the way here. Don't know, we never know, right? Because hey, that's what we do here. We just go with the flow. We talk about current problems and try to identify solutions. That being said, uh, I'm not going to tell too much of her story because she's an amazing lady, and she was just telling me some stuff, and I'm like, wow, like this is absolutely a beautiful guest on today's show. And I can't wait to get into it. But that being said, Miss Shaw, how are you doing?
I am doing well today. Thank you for asking.
Absolutely. And you're from Canada.
Yes.
I got an interesting Canadian story for you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And very interesting. So I've been to Mexico, which is no issues at all. Paid $1, walked across, uh, paid another $1 to come back across into the US. Phenomenal experience down there. Now, I tried to go into Canada. Like I say, tried. Canada is a whole different ball game and a whole different beast. They held me up there at the Canadian border and the U.S. border because both of them are separate buildings. They held me up there about a good solid 3 hours in total. Hour and a half up there at the Canadian side. Had to do a U-turn, come back around to the U.S. side. Another hour and a half, and I'm just like thinking, I'm like, I'm going to jail, man. I'm going to jail up here, and I'm a therapist. So me, I teach patients how to ground and how to remain calm and all that. And me, I'm freaking panicking. Okay,
Yep.
I'm literally panicking. Both of the border patrol folks were saying, "Hey, like you're good, you're good, Kev, you're good." In my mind, I can't leave the facilities till they give me permission, right? Like I am panicking, full blown panic attack. So I'm walking around, and when I'm up there on the Canadian side, I'm walking back and forth. I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4. Come back 1, 2, 3. Like it was crazy. I get down to the U.S. side, same thing, full blown panic attack, and I literally start touching the walls, walking as and slide my hand down the walls and just talking, thinking it out. Like, how does the wall feel?
Yes, just grounding yourself, right?
Right, right.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I wasn't able to get into Canada. They turned me around at the border. Knowing now, I probably wouldn't have knowing what I know now, wouldn't have had a panic attack. But you just don't know in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. I told you I had an interesting Canadian story.
Yeah. Well, I can't speak for who works at the Border Patrol because I don't travel much. I mean, I've only ever been to Disneyland once, and that was back in '97.
Oh, and it's interesting. I've been all over the country and never have been to Disneyland or Disney World. Never. So you're from Canada and
Hmm.
you are here, and you also have a book published too, right?
I have a couple books
A couple
published.
books. Ooh,
Yes,
that's
it's a
even better.
series.
A series of
Yes.
books. What? This
Yeah.
is Listen, folks. We bring on a lot of people. Everybody from artists to people who do music to people who do, who are authors to everybody in between. And so, with that being said, let's talk about your books first, because I don't want to forget about the books, because that's where the meat and potatoes of today's session or today's episode is about, right? See, I said session like I'm in therapy already. Like, so a few books. First of all, before we talk about them, I want to know where people can find them at, because if they know where we can find them at, then they're probably going to go straight and look for J.M. Shaw
Yes.
before we get into the meat and potatoes of them.
Well, check out my website, jmshawauthor.com. Then you can see all my books. You can read about them. There's links to them to find them online through Amazon, through Kobo, through Barnes and Noble Press. You can also check out my links to my Instagram and Facebook and see a little bit more about where I'm coming from, my writer's journey, and follow me along and see what else I'm doing.
Sweet. All right, so let's talk about your books. Like, what prompted you to write your books?
So I've always been a very what if person, trying to understand the world. I very much felt very confused by everything around me. And I didn't know why. I felt like an alien dropped off in this world without a script. And I could see other people, communicating and being able to interact and have no troubles at all. And things like that, like starting conversations or what to say to people, were really confusing to me. And I used to get very overwhelmed. So I started writing as a hobby. I needed an outlet. It kind of turned into a passion, became an obsession at times. And now, over 30 years later, I'm still writing, and it's become more of my therapy. But I had never shared anything until 2019. I was diagnosed with autism and ADHD, which made everything make sense. I gave myself permission to not necessarily understand the world, to ask questions, and without feeling like I should know this because everybody else does. And it was that diagnosis that gave me the courage to take my first novel, send it to an editor, keeping in mind the worst they can say is it sucks. And they came back and they said, no, this is good. You should publish. So 2 years later, I did. And I now have 4 books in a series. I'm working on my 5th, and it's a magic fantasy, action adventure, some supernatural suspense kind of sprinkled in for good measure because I get bored easily. The arc of my series is that there's our world, our time, coexisting magical realm, but a veil that separates us. We can't see across this veil. We don't have magic, but these creatures that do can and have, and they've been the source of our fairy tales and mythologies and what have you. My main character, Callum Walker, is a young man born with the ability to use magic, which makes him different than everybody else. He's trying to figure it out, trying to understand why, trying to make the most of it. He ends up, he's able to cross that veil because of his magic. And he becomes embroiled in this magical realm, learning about this world and all the beings therein. Adventures ensue, and we follow him through the series as he's trying to figure out who he is, where he belongs, because he's too magic for our side, but too human for that side, and master these abilities so that he, doesn't suffer any more than he has to.
No, I got you. No, and it's interesting because when you think about, writing as it being like therapeutic,
Mm-hmm.
research supports that, like all sorts of writings, whether it's journaling, right?
Yep.
If it's writing, research supports that, right? And so to see that, how writing helps you, right? And then when you finally got a diagnosis or what have you, like it was almost like the stars aligning for you, the stars,
Mm-hmm.
everything aligning for you. That is interesting, and I think for a lot of people though, and I'm curious to know from you, was it like, being female? Was it being Caucasian? Like, was it being just you didn't understand like your a lot of your diagnoses, right? Because a lot of things make people feel not a part of, not comfortable, being in
Hmm.
their own skin. And a lot of people find temporary solutions such as sex,
Hmm.
drugs, rock and roll, right?
Yes.
With things, when they don't feel comfortable in their own skin, when they don't feel like, hey, I am who I am and I'm okay with that, when they're not there.
Hmm. Yeah.
Like, so I'm curious as to like how long were you in that type of mentality before you figured out that writing was, hey, this is an outlet for me.
I think what it came about was a lack of control. I started people watching. And that I didn't know how to communicate with people, and I came up with my own strategies. One of those strategies was to write down conversations I saw. So I would literally have a notebook and I would write, so and so said this. This was the reply. Oh, there's a smile. This must be what I need to say when somebody says that. So I started writing to understand things because it's slow and I could control it. I could control what was said. I tried reading. I moved into reading because there's only so much you can understand about people's interactions, motivations, thoughts, feelings by watching. There's only so much you can do by watching. So I started reading because when you're reading fiction or reading things, you can get inside characters' heads and you can kind of see, oh, this is what's spawning that behavior. This is what they're thinking. This is what they're feeling. And eventually that wasn't necessarily enough. I needed to express my own feelings and understand my own feelings. So I used to write characters and put myself in their head so I could feel what they're feeling, and I'd write my emotions through them and I'd see how they dealt with things so that I could have some sort of resolution, even if it was fictional.
And it's almost like that, when I tell people in recovery, like from substance use, things like that, and like, hey, if you go to a 12-step meeting, find things to identify with. Don't find things that, don't compare yourself to. Don't find the
Mhm.
difference. Don't attach yourself there. Attach yourselves to the similarities, how you think, feel, things you did, things you said, your experiences, so on and so forth. Do you feel like I'm curious, do you think that when you were reading, when you started off in the literature area, because it started with reading,
Mhm.
when you do you think that your experience with identification kind of, maybe, I don't know if the word is prompted or maybe fueled that passion in the literature space? I mean, give me your thoughts on that one.
So, reading and being able to see inside people, like fictional people, obviously, but being able to see inside their heads was okay because it gave me an understanding of how people operate, kind of like you're opening up a computer to look inside and see how the parts are connected, right? But it didn't give me any understanding about how my feelings work and how, I mean, even identifying my feelings sometimes to this day can be difficult. I will feel upset or uneasy or I'll feel like just not right, but I don't know, and it can take me sometimes a week, sometimes a couple days to figure out, okay, I'm feeling restless. But it took me a while to understand that that's the feeling that I'm feeling. So I started writing in a period of time when I was heading into puberty. That's
Mhm.
when I started. So as you know, puberty is a lot of really tumultuous emotions, and it's very difficult. And since I didn't have anybody to talk to, I talked to myself. I lived through my characters. Whatever I was feeling in the time, I made my characters feel that and put them in situations that would elicit those emotions so I could see how they reacted and I could control it. I can't control anything else in my world, but I could control my characters and their world.
Uh, Yeah, and I think that that sense of control gives you somewhere to kind of like land home at.
Yes.
Huh. I mean, and just think about it too. Like when we feel lack of control, like what goes on here? I know when when I don't feel like I'm in control of anything, like I literally, I mentally feel like I'm chaotic as all get out.
Yes, everything's falling apart. There's no structure, there's no safety, puts you on edge. And, I mean, I suffered with a lot of anxiety because of that. And that's another reason why it was helpful, because it gave me something to focus on.
Now I'm curious. Okay, I'm curious because you're struggling with a lot of mental health, even though you probably didn't have words for it and titles and diagnoses at that moment, right?
Mhm.
Like, did you feel out of place for a long time until you?
Yes, I very much did. When I was going to school, I mean, as you know, autism in girls, because we tend to mask it a lot, it's very difficult to diagnose. I wasn't severe. I was, I'm what they call nowadays, they call high functioning, but at, you know, before that, it would have been called Asperger's.
Mhm.
I didn't struggle in school, and unless you struggled in school, you didn't get noticed. There was just a lack of education on it. Like I have dyslexia as well, and I, again, had to come up with my own strategies because it
Mhm.
wasn't recognized as much. So I used to, like, when I'm reading, again, I was reading, I get to the end of the line and I get lost coming back. My spelling was atrocious. I miss words. I still miss words. So I get my computer nowadays to read back to me because it won't read over the words that I see but aren't there. So but when I was a kid, I used to, get to the end of the line and then coming down, I get lost. I'm like, oh crap, the line's moved. So I would take a bookmark, and nowadays they do those, they do have tools for that. And I put a bookmark under the line, and then I get to the end of that line and I move it down. And then I get to the end of that and move it down. I use that as a strategy to help me read. And I had a teacher come up to me one day, take my bookmark away, and said, that's not how we read. And so me, well, okay, what else can I do? Oh, I can use my finger. You can't take that away. So I had to accommodate to the world that would not be able to, that would not accommodate me.
Ooh, as you said that, let me just disclose here for a moment. Way that teacher did you that way, I just had fire go through my veins.
Yes. Oh, yes.
I mean, just
Yeah.
think about, a patient. Listen to me. Listen, forgive me, okay? That's my clinical self trying to rear its little kid right now. Just think about a person who's struggling to read, can't keep who's got dyslexia, don't understand I have dyslexia, but I'm struggling
Mhm.
because I'm, whatever. I'm afraid to whatever, right? Person who's struggling to read uses something to help them read and stay on
Mhm.
point. And you snatch that tool away. You ain't
Yes.
supposed to do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was a different time. I mean, I saw another teacher in elementary slap the left-handedness out of another kid.
What?
So it was just a different time, and like I think there was a lack of understanding, and I was also so I I have I have an understanding now of how I learn, but at the time, because I didn't learn the same way as other people learned in school. So, for example, when you're learning to read, they teach you the letters, and then you put the letters together for words, and then you build sentences and paragraphs, and then it builds from there, right? But you have that foundation, the pieces. I can't learn that way. I have to see the big picture and break it down into component parts. So for when we moved from one province to another, and I started into school, I was put into the what they at the time called special ed classes because I wasn't learning the math as well. I now come to find out I'm actually gifted in math. Otherwise, I have a propensity for numbers, and it just feels good. Math feels, it's like playing with games, playing number games. But it wasn't until I got to the end of the class, like the end of that school year, toward the end of the school year, when they had been working on all the different parts, putting them together, and then I saw the big picture, and then it all made sense, and I blew past my other classmates, and then they put me back in mainstream. But before then, like they just didn't understand that kids don't learn the same way. That there's different. Sometimes you need to accommodate your teaching. I did that myself, and I learned how I learned so that I could adjust.
Wow. No, and I appreciate you doing that because it's self-advocation, right?
Hmm.
It's interesting you share that because I remember, I'm left-handed too, right? So,
Hmm. Yeah. So
so
my son is as well.
right, and we're 10% of the global population, and we're the only
Hmm.
part of the population that operates out the right side of the brain. Bingo! I've
Yes.
been waiting to say that. I've been waiting to say that. Ooh. Anyways, before I get off track there and get all into my selfish feels. I remember my mom dated somebody or married somebody like freaking 20,000 years ago when we were knee high to a grasshopper.
Hmm.
And I was the only person in the family at that time that wrote with the left hand, that were left handed.
Yep.
Homeboy tried to beat it into me to write with my right hand.
Hmm.
No, I mean, and so things like that will make people feel, like demeaning,
Yeah.
not a part of, detract from people around me and things around me, even from myself.
Hmm. Yeah, I know. And I mean, going through the only reason I was diagnosed in 2019 was because my sons were diagnosed and we were going through the ADOS assessment, which is a lot more in depth than I think there's other assessments out there, but the ADOS assessment is like the gold standard. And they were flagging things that they called red flags. And I was like, why is that a red flag? I've done that my whole life. And then it was kind of this eureka. It's like, wait a minute, those are the things you're looking for? Because, like, I'll put it this way, you don't know, like, I didn't know that there was anything wrong with me because I couldn't think outside of my own head. Once I became diagnosed with autism, somebody asked me a question that strikes the heart of this problem. They asked me, so what is it like to be autistic? And I said, I don't know. What is it like to not be autistic? You tell me that, and then I can tell you what the differences are. But otherwise, I don't know. It's all I know.
Wow. So let me get a time frame on this, okay? Don't tell your age. You don't have to rip that band-aid off. Kindergarten, throughout school, struggling, 2019,
Mhm.
boom,
Yep.
diagnosis, and oh my God, it makes sense. The
Yeah,
whole
it
world
did.
is
Yeah.
aligned. How long of a time frame, roughly? Give me a rough estimate. Again, you don't have to tell your age and rip that band-aid off for us, but give us a rough estimate because the reason I ask is very important for people to understand.
Mhm. I was in my late 30s when I was diagnosed. Had I been diagnosed younger, had there been that education, I would not have had to come up with my own strategies. But knowing what I know now, it was eye-opening. Like I could see it, I could look back once I started to research it because it's not just me I'm trying to understand, it's my kids and I'm trying to help them. And looking back and looking at the things that they look at, I was like, wow, I did all that. And then I recognized that these are things that my kids did that I didn't know were not typical. Like my older son, when he was, I said I made a script. Well, my older son is very much like me, and being 7 years old, 6 7, sorry. um he would go to the parks and he would try to play with the kids at the park, and he wanted to start conversations. He didn't know how to start them, and that was very much me. So where I started to watch and make comments, he would go up to kids and just stand there, right, face to face, or between two kids that are talking, he'd stand there. He's like, they have to see me. They want to start a conversation. They have to see me. Maybe they'll start it. I don't know how to start it. And so I used my coping strategy and taught him how to make a script. And then he talks to kids, but he didn't know how to start conversations. I saw stimming behaviors in both my kids, and then recognized that I used to have a lot of stimming behaviors. I still do. I go out for walks nowadays, and trying to explain this to people. I go for walks. I'll put my headphones on. I'll be listening to music. I'll let my mind wander. But at the same time, I'm seeing every single thing around me. I'm noticing every single sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. And as the cars pass me, in order to stay grounded, you were counting your steps, you were touching the walls. I add up numbers on license plates until I get a single digit. And I know that sounds weird, but that's how I ground myself.
Wow. No, and folks, the reason I asked that is because of this. If you're listening or watching, um, going, struggling with mental health it's not for the faint of heart. That's number one. It's the same thing as white knuckling it, right? And I'm trying not to drink liquor and not to do dope, right? It's the same concept. Or white knuckling it because I don't really understand. I don't really comprehend. I don't really know how to associate or relate to the world. All of these things. It's one thing to experience that temporarily, which I think most people do have some form of social anxiety. I think a lot of people do, or as far as like on a minute level here.
Mm-hmm.
Even I people think I'm a social person, and you put me in a room full of people I don't know. You know, I mean, but now
Yes.
once I get warmed up, I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah, and you if you can connect with somebody, but imagine, wanting to connect with people but not knowing how. And I know it's probably going off topic, but what it doesn't I don't really feel bad when people say this, but it just shows me the lack of understanding that still exists out there when people say, aren't we all a little on the spectrum? And I'm like, okay, well, imagine you're driving down a highway in a hailstorm and you've got somebody in a semi truck and somebody in a motorcycle. Technically, you're all drivers, but you're going to have different experience. You're going to suffer different things, and you're going to have different challenges. When things that come naturally to other people, like playing with toys. My kids did not know how to play with toys. That's something that should come naturally to kids. And trying to explain it that they didn't know how to play with toys, but we had to teach them that. It's not that they couldn't learn. We had to actively teach them something that would come naturally to other people.
Yeah. And that right there, 30-ish years of dealing with it. Mm-hmm. Not knowing.
I taught teaching myself to look people in the eyes, teaching myself to talk to people, teaching myself how I learn so I could teach myself. And yeah, these things you'd think they'd be natural to learn, but they're not.
No.
Yeah.
Right. Now, let me ask you this now. All right. After you started learning these coping skills, okay, I say coping skills. I don't really like the word coping skills, but I'm going to use it just because it's Once you started learning these and identifying these things at work, did it click all at once, or did it take time?
It wasn't until after my diagnosis and I started looking back and seeing all the things that I did to cope, to be able to function in this world. That's what made it. That's when it started to make sense. And I started to see that, because at the time I thought everybody went through this and they just, did it a whole lot better, kind of learned things a whole lot better, because I couldn't see in other people's heads. I just imagined that, they're going through the same things. Like, I figured everybody built working seismographs and buried in the backyard. How would I know otherwise unless I asked other people? And it's just, I figured it's a normal thing that 12-year-olds do. So, that's kind of like, I'm just using that as an example. So how would I know that I'm different? And I'm seeing everybody else living a certain way and acting a certain way. Well, I just have to figure out how. They've already figured it out. I haven't yet figured it out. So I need to figure out how to act like them so that I can be like them. I thought my struggles were the same as everybody else's.
No, and I appreciate you sharing this. Okay, I have a serious question I have to. Well, all of them are serious, but this one's also a serious question too. Like, it's a little bit more in depth. A lot of people who I've worked with a lot with people with many different concerns, issues, histories, experiences, etc., etc. And a lot of people will have turned to some type of thing to help them feel comfortable and okay, whether it's with themselves or feel right in the world or anything of that sort. Did you turn to anything, alcohol, drugs, anything, sex, drugs, rock and roll, as I like to say?
I think if I have to mention, like, I drank a lot of coffee, and I was told later on, because once I was diagnosed with autism and ADHD, I was put on medication, and I talked to my doctors, like, now I'm on this medication for ADHD. I can't drink more than a cup of coffee or I start vibrating. And he said that, and I said, I used to be able to drink 2 pots of coffee a day and have no problems. And he said that was a self-medicating thing, because it's a stimulant, and that's how ADHD medication works. It's like a stimulant, and some of them, I mean, not all of them. No. And I'm not saying the medication is good for everybody, but it helped for me. But because I'm now taking that as a medication to help this problem, I don't need to. It would be like overdosing if I'm taking 2 pots of coffee. So I didn't turn to drugs. I didn't turn to alcohol. I had a very conservative family life. And I didn't start smoking. It wasn't something that appealed to me. So I was more inside my head rather than outside of me. I looked inward, like, what can I do? How can I make things easier for myself and thinking in my thoughts?
Internalizing behaviors versus externalizing behaviors.
Yeah. And I mean, it probably helped the fact that I was very introverted, so I didn't have a big friend group. So had I had a big friend group, I might have, you know, been more susceptible to peer pressure, and it might have driven me to external sources to try to help myself.
Yeah. No, and it makes sense. It does. And it's interesting because when we think about autism, it's not just a singular. I'm not an expert at it, so if there's anybody out there listening or watching the show, don't quote me on what I'm about to say. I'm not an expert in that area. That's not what my expertise is. But from my interpretation and my experience with autism itself, it's not just one singular problem. It's not just one singular, 11-point diagnosis like you get for alcohol use disorder or marijuana use or cocaine use or what have you. It's multifaceted.
Mm-hmm.
I think nowadays, don't quote me again, don't quote me, anybody who's listening or watching. I want her feedback on this one. I think now they're starting to use the term neurodivergent or something like that.
Neurodivergent versus neurotypical.
Yeah. Now, what is the difference with those? I'm curious.
So neurotypical would be, the typical person, like what they deem as being the standard to compare it to. Whereas neurodiverse is people who are atypical. They diverge from what would be considered, quote unquote, I hate this term, normal. Because, I mean, just because you are neurodivergent does not make you abnormal. It's just your brain works different. I've tried to explain this to my kids because they're both on the spectrum. I got 2 boys and they're both on the spectrum. They have different challenges. My older son struggles more in social communication issues. My younger son is more OCD. They both meet all of the requirements across all the different, specificities, all the different categories. They all struggle in all of them. But it's just they have more problems in one area versus another because they're unique, and that's why they call it a spectrum. As long as you check off, there's just some kind of boxes and stuff, but as long as you meet all of those criteria as at least a minimum, you can be diagnosed with autism. But you're gonna have more in one area than another, just like you would with school. Like some people do well in math, other people do well in social studies or arts and stuff. We're all different, and even neurodivergence are different. And my train of thought just disappeared.
That's okay. It's all right. Listen, we're having a great. I'm enjoying the conversation. You're teaching me some stuff too, okay?
Yes, and I apologize. I do talk a lot with my hands, so
I ain't worried about it. Listen, that's the least of my concerns. I talk with some with my hands too, so you ought to see me when I'm. I had to speak Saturday night, and so the whole time, like, I'm a very high energy person anyway. So behind the podium, like, you can throw the podium away. I don't need the podium. I mean, I'm
you have to
literally
pace. Are you the pacer?
I am all across and all up around the front, right?
Yes.
And I'm just
Yeah.
back and forth. And I mean, I'll stand behind the podium here and there, but like, come on, like the podium.
Yes.
Like, I don't need a podium, to have a conversation.
Yeah.
And
That's physically moving, kinetic, like kinetic learning. And it's weird because that's how I learned my multiplications. I was doing jumping jacks and to learn my 6 times tables, like 6 times 1 is 6, and that's how I learned it. And to this day, I still do the little rhyme whenever I say 6 times 6 is 36, and I have to say it in a rhyme. And yeah, it sticks in your head. But yeah, I do that too. Movement, keep moving. Because if you're sitting still, all you want to do, it's like, all you want to do is keep moving, keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. But if you're moving, then you're burning off that energy and your mind can focus.
right.
Yeah.
No, and I'm right there with you. I mean, I'm exactly right there with you. I don't like to sit around and. I mean, now don't get me wrong. I have my moments where I'm just like, I just want to be so freaking lazy.
Yeah.
Just let me just lay around, just that third, just throw on some TV, kick back, relax.
Mm-hmm.
That's a different story. I have my moments.
Yes.
But for the most part, though, everybody knows me as soon as my feet hit the ground. I mean, I'm shooting off like a rocket. Like,
Oh yeah.
you know,
Yeah, I
I'm going.
remember homeschooling my son, and my oldest one is very severe ADHD, and he my younger one as well, but my younger one struggles more with the his brain works too fast, so he doesn't listen, whereas my older one couldn't stop moving. He was like me, he couldn't stop moving. And I was homeschooling my kids for the first couple of years of school, and I remember my older one saying, Mom, I can't sit still, can you tie me to my chair? And I'm like, I'm not going to do that, but how about we learn with you pacing across the room? How about we do that? You know, and because that helped me when I was younger, that's how I learned, and I figured that out on my own. So let's I'll give you the suggestion, how about we do this, see if it works. If it doesn't, let's try come up with another strategy, because I'm very creative, so I can think of a lot of things, you know.
I love it. Got, and I think a lot of people will just stop at one or two. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They don't keep going, and
Yeah.
it's almost like you are becoming an annoyance or a nuisance to them,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And then, you know, look, parenting is a 24/7 job, not a 9 to 5 or
Mm-hmm.
8 to 5 or a 9 to 6 or a 12 to 2 or whatever. And
Yeah.
parenting is a 24/7 job. I don't think it's important to realize that.
Yes.
So let me ask you this then, right? You were your kids were getting diagnosed at 2019, right? 2018,
Mm-hmm.
2019.
Yeah.
And you got diagnosed at 2019. So what prompted, I'm curious now, okay, because somebody else might be out there struggling with something right now, and this question might be an answer to them. Now, just so anybody knows, I don't, uh, on this show, we do impromptu questioning. So we talk, and then something will come up, I'll have a thought, and I'll be like, ooh, let me ask you this, or ask about this, that, and the third. That's the way we operate.
Mm-hmm.
So what prompted all of the testing? I'm curious over that.
It's I think it was seeking answers. Like, those are the things you're looking for, but that's been me my whole life. I wonder. And I've tried really hard not to look at autism as a disability. But it's something that my kids, you know, if my kids are struggling with it and I've had the same struggles, then, you know, I'm probably struggling. I probably am also on the spectrum. And if I am, then maybe I can help my kids because I helped myself. Um, and just kind of share the strategies that I used. But it gave me a little bit of justification and, you know, kind of clarity. You know, I'm not broken. My brain just works different. I can figure this out. I'm not an alien dropped off on this planet without a script. You know, it's just this world is not going to accommodate me, and that's why I had to accommodate to it. I had to come up with my own strategies to function.
Hmm. And I think what you just shared, one of the things that come to my mind is experience is the best teacher.
Mhm.
Because you had to teach yourself. You had teachers that were not supportive, right? You had teachers that would snatch things and say, no, you can't use that. And it's sad. And so you had to teach yourself the hard way.
Mhm.
And so being able to give what you learned, help you to pass that on to your children.
Yes. Yeah.
That should be, go ahead.
No, I'm agreeing with you. Yes. Yeah, it
Yeah.
helped.
Yeah. So let's fast forward it, you know, now, right? Currently, do you still homeschool your children, or are they
Oh
public school?
no, no. They're in school now. I gave them a good academic head start, so they are about a grade or two above in math. They are really good with reading. I mean, both of them picked up, like, they pick up skills in school really quickly, like I did. I taught myself to read when I was 4, because I wanted to read, so I picked it up. I always excelled in school, so I wasn't too worried about that. But I can I can only do so much. I cannot teach them how to make friends without exposing them to other kids. And at some point, I'm not going to be there. So they need to learn how to communicate with other people. I've given them the foundations, I've helped them to develop a script. They need to practice it. And they can't do that with me at home. So, you know, there's only so much I can do. So I enrolled them in school. They've been in now. This is our second year. This will be their second year of school.
Awesome.
Mm.
So, okay, and the reason I asked that question is because this leads into my next question or two. We talk about a lot of gaps in healthcare, in public education. Just a lot of gaps across the board, right? Whether it's law enforcement, healthcare, education, add to the list infinitum, right? Employment is another thing. What do you think has changed in public education from when you were growing up to currently with your children in the educational system? What do you think has changed?
Well, I don't think there's as many resources as there needs to be, but I think there is an attempt for people to understand that not every kid works the same way. They don't all think the same way. They don't all learn the same way. And there's an attempt to understand and include other kids and to help other kids to be accepting that everybody is different, to be more accepting of that. Because there was there's still a lot of bullying and stuff, but I'm seeing in my kids' school that they're talking about, I gave a presentation yesterday to a classroom, and I mentioned that I have autism and ADHD, and there was about 3 hands that went up saying, me too, because they've been talking about it. They never would have done that when I was that age. It was like, autism, oh, you don't look autistic, you're not struggling in school. There was, unless you were disruptive or you had difficulties learning, they didn't even notice, where ADHD kids were the ones that they were the ones that needed more discipline.
Mm.
So I think that has changed. There's an effort to understand it.
No. Yeah, no, and I appreciate you answering that, and I think you're right. Might not have the resources there, the type of resources that they need, but at least there's this push for education with, add to that list of whatever education needs to be on. What do you think is, I don't know, what do you think is needed to help continue bridging those gaps from back when you were going to school and now?
I hear a lot of people that are working with kids on the spectrum, and I'm focusing more on like autism and ADHD because that's my understanding. From my perspective, I found that I was able to relate better to the struggles and why, like how my kids were feeling and their struggles, because I'm also on the spectrum. And I feel like I could help other people on the spectrum because I understand what they're thinking. And I'm not saying that people who aren't autistic can't help people who are. I'm just saying that it's hard to see something if you've never experienced it. It's hard to help somebody through an experience that they've never had themselves. And so I think that maybe those people who are able to help, who have come through their own journey or still coming through their journey with autism and ADHD, should be implemented to help those who are still struggling, to say, hey, this is what I did. Why don't we try this? I also noticed that when my kids were diagnosed, there was an abundance of information on how to help young people, services in school, youth services for kids on the spectrum. I could find almost nothing for information for adults. And there's a lot of adults right now that are getting diagnosed where they missed all of those, they could have gotten help when they were kids, but now they're too old for that help. But then there's no resources for them because they're now adults. But they still need help. And there's, so resources need to be implemented in those areas as well.
Wow. So it sounds like we've made a dent in certain areas, while in other areas we are still lacking significantly. Would that be correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And it's sad. It is sad because you have people, children out there that are struggling.
Mm-hmm.
So,
you have adults that are struggling and don't know why. Yeah.
Right. You have adults and children that are struggling, and it's our job, right, to I don't want to say it's our job to help, educate, train, raise up the next generation and if even we as adults are struggling and don't have the resource or whatever, how does that impact the next generation? How does that impact our
Yeah.
children, or maybe you're a teacher? How does that impact the students in the classroom? Things
Yeah.
like that. So no, I definitely agree with what you're saying. Um, Let me ask you another question. Do you feel like there should, as far as training goes and education goes on the teacher side, or even the administrative side of the educational system, do you feel like there needs to be more, uh, maybe annual training or what have you throughout the educational, their professional educational experience, and or maybe even as as far as working in the field of education, maybe some annual training or something like that?
I think that the teachers are receiving training and they're doing the best that they can. I think what the issue is a lack of funding. Um, they I've met some really good teachers and they're doing the best that they can and they've taken extra classes and they've learned all that they can. I think you can continue that. There's always more that you can learn as you go, but their hands are tied because there's 30 kids in their class, and if half a dozen of them have autism or special needs, but there's only one teacher, how can they help them? I think that there needs to be more money in the educational system so that they can have people that can work maybe not even one-on-one, because I didn't need a one-on-one. I mean, I could have benefited from some help, but I didn't need that much help. It's just it needed a little extra. Yeah.
Yeah. And it sounds like, maybe some of that funding. I'm not an educational expert here, so don't quote me on anything. But it sounds like also maybe some funding into resources with maybe tutoring. Maybe having some tutoring people or some
Yeah.
tutors come in.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I don't see why parents can't be utilized in that too. I think that, I think there's a trend in this. Well, I'm from my own experience and I've seen it with other kids and other parents is we'll just send our kids to school and then they'll learn everything there. And then when they come home, the education stops. I think that parents should be involved in teaching their kids as well. So I think there needs to be some education given to parents on how to parent and teach their own children that are on the spectrum. I mean, not every parent is on the spectrum. I'm fortunate in that I can understand what my kids are going through because I've gone through it myself, but not every parent is in that situation.
Right. And I think you're right. I think, I've heard too many people say that, oh, the school will take care of it, or hey,
Yeah.
The school isn't there to raise our children. They're there to teach and educate, not raise.
Yes.
There's two different concepts and two different definitions there. Teach is not the same thing as raise. And so when you raise, you're also, part of that, being the job of the parent is also teaching your children too.
Yeah, teaching them life lessons, because the teachers aren't going to teach them, how to. They'll encourage them to be polite, or they'll encourage them with these life lessons like, being a good person, having good morals. They can't teach those things. That's up to the families to teach. Yeah.
Yep. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, and this is another resource for anybody, and this is a personal request for anybody who knows Propel or the makers of Propel. Every episode, this is another resource again, okay? Every episode, I show up with one of these Propel waters. I'm asking, again, the public, that if you know anybody who makes Propel, the people who do, tell them we're looking for a sponsor of our show. This is in every single episode. We've done 60 plus episodes already. This is in every single episode. So that's another gap that we're identifying on this show. No, I had to throw that out there. But no, you're right. I think there's this huge, yeah. A lot of things need to change. With the educational system, and even with parenting. I there's so much stuff that needs to change. So let me ask you this then. As far as the healthcare system is concerned in autism and mental health, right? What has been your experience there?
I don't know about in the US, but Alberta has something called FSCD, which is like family services. They give you money to help with resources that your kids need or your family needs outside of school, like counseling, like respite care, like if they need any tools to function, like wheelchairs, those kind of things. Like
Mhm.
they help outside of education. They help the family so that they can live. But those services are very limited, and for us, we felt that they weren't that helpful because it was just difficult to access them in our situation and stuff. And I'm not saying that that's the same for everybody. So maybe that needs to be looked at a little bit better. There needs to be more ease of care, or maybe more individualized things. It didn't work for us. But also too, I noticed that unless you're struggling a lot. So my kids are both high functioning. Doesn't mean that they're any less autistic. They still struggle, but they're deemed high functioning because they are not nonverbal, they are not learning impaired, those kind of things, right? So they can talk, they can learn, but there's challenges that they couldn't function without help. In those situations, I think that they have a cutoff and they just don't give you as much care. As far as the hospital systems, they have a nurses hotline that we can utilize. It's an 811 number in Alberta. I don't know what it is in other provinces, but they also have the suicide prevention line, and you can reach out to them and then they can get you information for different services and stuff. There's a long wait list because obviously, there's a lot of people, and there's only so much resources to go around. But also, 911, we have that as well. And in hospital care, I haven't had to utilize where, mental health, going into a hospital for mental health issues. But I suppose there is some resources there. If you showed up in emergency and said, hey, I need some help, there would probably be able to help you. I just don't know as much about those resources.
Gotcha. So let me ask you another question. Let's build on to that. Okay, your books. Do you feel like they could be utilized as a resource? Knowing the way you like to write, as far what helped you. Do you feel like your books could be utilized as like a, as far as like a, and I say a resource, not like I guess more of a educational component. Does that make sense?
It does. And although I have written, like wholesome messages, and I've written some of my insight and observation, I can't see how my books per se can be considered a mental health tool.
Mhm.
But I think encouraging people to write their own stories could definitely be a tool for them. Like journaling is a
Mhm.
lot of, you mentioned journaling early on. It's that outlet, that is more important than the actual story, I think.
No, and I definitely agree, and that's why I was asking. Because a lot of people will always. I like to ask that question, especially when it comes to mental health and authors, right? Because every author writes differently. Every author,
Mhm.
some authors will say absolutely, my books can be utilized as like a resource for educational pieces of it. Some of them some of them was completely different. And so I'm glad that you asked that question, because some people will say, hey, if I buy your books and I read over them, will it you know will it help
It'll
me?
entertain, but yeah, I can't see it
Yeah,
helping mental health
no,
issues.
no,
I
no.
do discuss mental health issues, and I discuss the importance of family and friends. And in my fourth novel, especially, I talked about overcoming trauma by facing it and leaning on the support of those people you care for, you trust, and you love. And that if you don't face your fears and face your traumas, in my story, that it'll fester inside until it becomes uncontrollable and it becomes toxic to you
Mm.
and you're no longer yourself. So I have talked about those things from my character's perspective based on my own experiences. But as far as a tool for mental health, I can't say that it is. I would be lying if I did.
No, no, and that's what I want to draw the line right there, is because using something as a tool is one thing. Using it as a resource for like to help build understanding, or the educational piece is a complete different story. There is a complete
Mhm.
different, and so and I'm glad you made that distinction, because, like, I always tell people, if you're going to read something like that, right? Like, if you're going
Yeah.
to read a book just for that piece, like, make sure you identify, right? Like, identify with what is going on, because that might be in that story. You might see, oh wow, this is what I can do to help myself out. And the reason I
Mhm.
say a lot of this stuff too is I do a lot of storytelling clinically. Is a
Mhm.
I do a traditional storytelling. It's a very therapeutic thing, and so what I like to do, as far as the storytelling, and folks, this is a tool that you might, if you're listening or watching, you might be able to implement, and do it again. Talk to your therapist about it, and tell them before you even go about it, and try to practice it. But you know, you can take one of her characters and you can say, okay, this is what I identify with. You can go through an experience that the character has, and you can relate your own life to that. You can relate your own experiences to that. You can identify with. You can talk about the way they feel, the way they think, the behavior. You can talk about all of that, and you can talk about what it means to you. You can,
Mhm.
and you can do it just, you, and it'll be a good family practice too. If you sit around with the family, y'all read a couple of pages, get into a character, say, wow,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It'll help build emotional intelligence, with the children.
Yes.
I
So
mean,
disclaimer on my books, they're a young adult and up. So a couple swear words here and there. Lots of action adventure, keep you
see, there
interested.
you go. I'm glad that you,
Hints of romance, but no sex.
right. And so, no, I
Yeah.
mean, and listen, if you need to do it with just you and your hubby, or you and your wifey, or whatever, like, I mean, listen, storytelling is a beautiful, beautiful therapeutic technique. And that's what I love about that. She literally did a whole series on basically storytelling, wrote her own characters, wrote her own,
Wrote my journey. Yeah.
yeah, their own. I mean, it's real life, but she
Yeah.
put her own experiences in I guess it's fiction, right? Fiction
Yes,
versus
it is. It's
nonfiction.
a fantasy fiction.
Yep, yeah.
Yeah.
And so she did a beautiful, man. This is what I love about her, and what I know about her is the way she took her experiences and put it into a novel, in different series, and like that is a beautiful, beautiful therapeutic technique. Absolutely. I definitely second, third, buy her books. Okay, Bob, give them as gifts at Christmas time, birthdays, holidays, give them as gifts. Uh, so yeah. Wow.
It was my therapy, and I wanted to tell the story that I'm a big fan for, like superheroes, but superheroes are too perfect. They're morally clean, and they are masters of their own abilities. But I'm not. I mean, I have a mind for math and creativity, but I'm not a master of it. So I wrote. People ask me if I'm my main character. I said no, but my main character has aspects of me, and I wrote it from their perspective, using my own emotional and emotional intelligence.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right there. And that is
Yeah.
absolutely, that is for a lot of people who write, that is what they do.
Yeah.
And so literally, your books can be used, you know, in many different forms. And so people buy her books. Like, she can help be part of a solution to a problem. She can be part of a solution, or her books can, her literature can. Um, so I can keep you on for another 2 hours, okay? 3 hours. I got so many thousands of questions running through my head.
Yeah. Eventually, my kids are going to come home from school, so then.
Right, right. And I need to let you go so you can prepare for your kids. All right, so let's start wrapping this thing up, and then we're going to, of course, more than welcome to come back on. I really,
Aw,
really have thoroughly enjoyed it.
I would love that.
Absolutely, ma'am. So if people want to, you know, maybe reach out to you as a coach, mentor, get you some, maybe ask you some guidance, even be a speaker, or guest speaker on their show, uh, how do they contact you?
I have a contact form on my website. They can email me or they can reach out to my publicist. His information is there, his phone number and his email as well as theirs.
Okay. And if there's one thing you want somebody to take away from this, what is that one thing?
It's not the end of the world. Like for autism, from my experience, like it's not the end of the world to receive a diagnosis. It doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean anything bad, and it doesn't mean that you can't function in this world. It just means that your brain works different. You can't filter things as easily. But you can find something you're good at and embrace it. And you can learn those things that come naturally to other people. It doesn't mean that you can't. It doesn't mean that you can, you'll never communicate with other people effectively. You can learn. You just have to actively learn.
Mm, I love it. I could not have said it better on that one. All right. Most important question that you're probably going to be asked today, except for your kids. Your kids might ask you something more important. Right?
What's for dinner? It's a pretty important one when they come home.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
What is your call to action?
Oh gosh, I would love to see people educated and educate people on, that that the diagnosis, any diagnosis is not the end of the world. And try really hard not to look at it as disabilities. As far as the writing call to action, I didn't share for many, many, many years. And then until I did, I had no idea that my work would touch so many people. So just because you don't think it's something, you're doing something that you don't think is good, unless you share it with somebody, you'll never know if it is or not. We are our own worst critics, and thinking that something is bad doesn't make it bad. Share and find out. The worst that they can say is it sucks.
I love it. I love it. Folks, listen, just because you get a diagnosis, just because your kids get a diagnosis doesn't mean anything. Okay? That's just a label. At the end of the day, it's still a human being.
Yes. And I've known a lot of people who are against labels, but I mean, it helps you to get the resources, and that's great. When you grow up and you're out of school and you don't need those resources, unless you tell somebody, a lot of times they don't even know.
Right? Absolutely. Absolutely. Listen, y'all heard it best here. Not from me, but from Miss Shaw. I was asking a bunch of questions and having a great conversation. I really appreciated her sharing her experiences on that one. So I do appreciate it. Seriously, thank you. You have been a phenomenal, phenomenal guest on here today, and looking forward to the next one.
Absolutely.
Yes, ma'am. So, listen, folks, again, reach out if you need help. Okay, there's resources available. Utilize your resources. That being said, thank you again, ma'am.